August 7th, 1998 brought to the fore hard questions. What just happened? Who could have committed this heinous act? Why us? Questions that 10 years on, Kenyans continue to ask. As Kenya grieved the loss of over 216 people, to the international community, the name of one man and one organization became coldly familiar to an outraged nation: Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda terrorist network. Osama bin Laden, a Saudi national and a fundamentalist Muslim, once part of the CIA-trained mujahideen who fought Russian occupation in Afghanistan, had turned his rage on the US, whom he described as the Great Satan for its alleged sins against Muslims in the Middle East. And so began threats of terror against US interests abroad. Kenya, one of the biggest of Osama's statements. But it wasn't until one other morning on September the 11th that the United States felt the crushing blow of terrorism on its soil. The date now known as 9/11 changed the world because it stung the United States and its allies into action against terrorists not just on their own soil, but abroad.
We will not wait to see what terrorists or terrorist states could do with chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons.
It is in this context that the war on terror is represented in Kenya 10 years after that bitter taste of terrorism. This has been a war permitted by a large section of the population, facilitated by the government, but led in Kenya largely by two nations that terrorists have had in their crosshairs since the six-day Israeli-Egypt war in 1967. The United States actively began pursuing its allies in the developed and developing world to legislate laws that would help find terrorists, such as the Anti-Terrorism Bill 2002. That same year, on November the 28th, Paradise Hotel, a hotel that catered almost exclusively to an Israeli clientele, was bombed. 16 people, 13 Kenyans and 3 Israeli nationals died. Yet again, Al-Qaeda stood accused for the atrocities of Kikambala, but this time its alleged master planner was on Kenyan soil when it happened. Mohammed Fazul became the newest target of international law enforcement agencies, including the Kenya police. It is the story of the pursuit of Fazul that we have followed, revealing some surprises about how the war on terror is playing itself out in Kenya. The Coast Province is home to the highest population of Muslims in the country, drawing from the region's historical ties to Arab traders and the Islamic faith. The province stands as a mix of modernity and devout dedication to Islam. It has also been a region where in the recent past there have been serious allegations of a harassment of Muslims over allegations of terrorism, the extradition of Muslim faithfuls to other countries, either as harassment or for interrogation, as well as the arbitrary arrest and torture of individuals over their alleged links to terrorists. The intensified search for Mohammed Fazul in particular almost always found expression in these cases. We searched and found people who had allegedly been harassed by authorities, and most were unwilling to talk. Then in Majengo we met Afia Mohammed, the wife of an alleged victim of harassment. She agrees to speak to us, but away from her home, where the absence of her husband hangs heavily. It is at the beach where, with evident difficulty, she opens up. She tells us that her husband of 9 years, Ahmed Ubgedia, was arrested by Kenyan authorities 2 years ago for his alleged links to the Al-Qaeda terrorist network. Her biggest fear, her 4-year-old daughter, may forever have lost links to her father.
Babake alikuja akashikwa nyumbani usiku saa 8 za usiku, wakamfunika macho, wakamtia pingu, wakasema yeye kuwa ni mshukiwa wa Al-Qaeda.
Afia paints a picture of a man whose life revolved around the mosque and his marriage. He came to Kenya 14 years ago from the Comoros Islands and settled at the coast in Mombasa, basing his life around religion before he met Afia. But even Afia knows that Ahmed's background bore an uncanny similarity to that of Mohammed Fazul, the man believed to be Al-Qaeda's point man in East Africa. Fazul is a Comoran by birth, but settled in Mombasa later on. Between shuttling from one East African country to another, he settled in Siu and married a Kenyan.
Na kama kweli mume wangu alikuwa ni mshukiwa Al-Qaeda, si angekuwa amepata information na akatoroka.
Ahmed, after being interrogated, was extradited back to the Comoros Islands. Despite the tag of terrorist on him, he tried to return to see his family, but was detained and returned to the Comoros. Once again, Afia's thoughts turned to her daughter. For now, she will have to grow up without her father around.
Sasa hajakuwa na fahamu ya kuuliza babake yuko wapi, lakini kwa simu anazungumza na anamwambia babake I love you, I miss you, na jambo hilo linasikitisha sana. Mtoto ambapo nakaa nafikiria siku ambao ataniuliza babake yuko wapi, amefanya nini, mbona hawezi kuja hapa.
Afia's story may be heartrending, but it would be difficult to compare it to that of Mohammed Surur's. Mohammed, a businessman born and raised in Mombasa, was returning home from the mosque one evening in early 2003, months after the Kikambala bombing. He claims that 4 men accosted him, handcuffed and forced him into their car at gunpoint. Then began a series of events similar to those only seen in movies.
Kupotea kwa gari kaanza kutembea mwendo wa kasi kweli kweli. Gari katembea muda masaa 5-6 hivi. Nikasi ya gari inapiga sharp corners 3. Ilipopiga sharp corners kisha gari kateremka. Baadaye kidogo kama muda dakika 10 hivi nishapoesha. Nikarudishwa ile nguo nikapelekwa pale kwenye boardroom hivi. Nilipofika hapo ndio nilipata wazungu wenyewe 8. Jamaa kaja na kiti cha aluminium ambacho kina mikono. Kaletwa kwa hapo, kikaunganishwa mawaya na computers, nikamwambia weka hapa. Kanambia sawa na wewe. Weka saini ya makaratasi. Ukitaka usalama wako. Ama sivyo utakufa. Nikamwambia hakuna neno, madamu mimi sijui, sihusiki, siwezi weka. Sio ofisa ambao ni FBI huyo, akabofa button moja. Akamwambia nilisikia uchungu ajabu sana ambao maisha yangu sija kusikia. Mpaka nilisikia harufu ya nywele zangu hizi. Nywele zangu nilisikia harufu yake.
Mohammed's story would have seemed far-fetched were it not for the repeated reports of torture of terrorist suspects. For instance, the torture of suspects by the US Army in Abu Ghraib. But this, according to US Ambassador Michael Ranneberger, is unavoidable in any country.
There are always some abuses and some excesses which occur. That's just part of life. That's going to happen. But what's important is that when that happens, that those cases be investigated.
But according to Mohammed, his interrogation wasn't even led by Kenyan authorities.
Hao wanne walikuwa ni Israeli na wanne ni Amerika. Vile ninavyoona mimi.
We squandered our neutrality at one stage and made ourselves vulnerable to counter moves by the other side.
And still following the trail of Mohammed Fazul, we found that suspects of terrorism who had been arrested, especially in Mombasa, often had something to do with the acts planned by Fazul, or that they bore similarities to the person or to the habits of Mohammed Fazul. By default, the detainees have all been Muslim, creating a perception that the Muslim community was being targeted. But one story in particular raises even more questions on the war on terror in Kenya after August 7, 1998 and November 28, 2002. About our positioning in the midst of countries said to be supportive of terrorists, about who is really leading the fight against terrorism locally, about the perceptions of the Muslim community and its alleged link to terrorism, but also about Muslims' belief in the strength of Islam, which in this case became its weakness. The story of Mohammed Kubwa, the one-time brother-in-law of Mohammed Fazul. John Allenham, KTN.